Welcome to Creative Piecemeal Podcast, a podcast for creatives. I'm your host, Tammy Takeishi. Join me for compelling conversations with artists, actors, authors, musicians, and other creatives about the impact of the creative and fine arts in their lives and our ever-changing world. Thank you for listening. Hello, welcome to Creative Piecemeal Podcast. I'm here with Malcolm Bruce. He's a musician and composer whose father, Jack Bruce, was in the epic British rock band Cream. And you teamed up before the pandemic to tour and play songs, but now you have also assembled like an amazing super cast of musicians to create a tribute album, which comes out on November 3rd called Heavenly Cream, a tribute to Cream. And the first single, Sunshine of Your Love, a classic, already out. My personal favorites, because I got to listen to the album early, is We're Going Wrong. Like, I had not heard it before, and I'm like, that's like my newest thing. I love that song so much. But welcome to the show, and
thank you, Tammy.
Tell me a little bit more about what made you all decide to do a tribute album.
Well, it was really the Cream lyricist Pete Brown. It was his idea, and he's actually sadly passed away earlier this year. But he was talking to a record label, and they kind of came up with this idea. Let's make a tribute to Cream album, but do an acoustic version of Cream songs. So, it's a different slant. It's not trying to sort of do, these songs are pretty well known, and they're known as kind of proto hard rock or whatever you say. So, very much like electric guitar, blues-based stuff. So it was just a different approach to go in the studio with this intention of recording with acoustic instruments only. So, Pete Brown he's the guy that really started the whole project off. And then he came to me. He came to the producer, Rob Cass, and he came to a guy called Mark Waters, who has shot a making of documentary that's being released at the same time, sort of fly on the wall interviews and recordings of the actual performances as well. So it's like a whole package coming out in November.
That sounds fantastic. Did it sort of bring back any memories of your childhood or anything when you did that?
Yeah, probably. I guess so. I mean, I wasn't born when Cream were first around. But yes, growing up, I grew up with my father and all of his music and different stages of his career. So yeah, I mean, I've got a resonance with that music, and I have a soft spot. I love all kinds of music, but I think Cream, there's something very powerful about it. The songs are great, but it's also improvisational. There's a lot of depth to the music, and it's sort of always being born anew. It's because of the improvisational element. So I think it does resonate with me in that way. But I think it resonates with other people too.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a favorite track on the new album?
I don't know, really. I think they're all really interesting songs. I guess maybe doing the few songs with Ginger Baker, because he was the original drummer in the band, and ended up being his last recording session before he passed away. It was a really special time just to have those few hours in the studio with him. And Ginger's kind of well known for being a bit grumpy, and he was a little bit grumpy, but he played beautifully in such a unique way that he only, he just played. He had such a personality on the instrument, and that came across when we were working with him. It was really, really fun. So I think just as an experience, I think that was probably one of my favorite moments, but it was all interesting.
That's excellent. And speaking personally, you, of course, are a musician, and you write music as well. Is there anything that you're working on the side that you're able to talk about?
I'm doing lots of stuff. I'm in the middle of making a new album that's going to come out next year, and it's called Fake Humans and Real Dolls. So it's a little play on words, but it's I'm right in the middle of it. I've written and recorded about 15 songs, but I'm working on a bunch more, and it's a really challenging record for me to make because it's sort of social commentary, but it's still very personal. And the world is changing so quickly. Artificial intelligence and social forces, there's so many things going on, I think. So, and I'm trying to capture a take on it without being judgmental or taking sides. We live in a world where it's all so polarized, isn't it? Everybody's got to take sides with stuff. And I think it's just really interesting. What are the deeper implications of what we're all going through collectively, and where is it heading? When are they going to drill that hole in my head and put the chip in, so that and what does that mean? What does it mean to be a human? So anyway, so I'm right in the middle of doing that, and that's going to come out next year, and I'm going to tour in support of it and come over to the US as well.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, but I'm doing lots of other stuff too. I'm developing opera projects and orchestral stuff, and practicing the piano a lot every day, like 3-4 hours every day, and going through the classical repertoire and all kinds of things. Just what it's like to be a musician. It's a constant process of development, and staying humble within that. There's always so much to explore, and to discover one's own voice, one's own creative voice as well. So yeah, that's my daily life, apart from standing on my head doing yoga in the morning.
That's wonderful. I love that you're exploring piano and getting in touch with that part of your creative self. You mentioned that you like to play classics. Are there any favorite composers?
Well, Bach, Chopin, Ravel, Debussy, Rachmaninoff, just all, I guess, just all that stuff. And then, more contemporary stuff as well. And I'm writing a lot of piano music. And I also do this thing at the moment where I do free improvisation, and I record it. So it's kind of like an exercise to do once a day. And sometimes it's 20 minutes, sometimes it's 45 minutes. And I just sort of see where that process takes me. And sometimes it's really interesting because a whole composition can be born, the shape of something can be born simply by just going, okay, I'm going to go on a little musical journey here. And then that can be, and because I've got, we've all now got the technology where we can sort of record those sort of things. It's a really interesting way of just capturing the spontaneity and in the moment and seeing what comes up. And every time I do it, it's different. So I've got like hours of this kind of crazy free improvised music that I could turn into actual music at some point.
Yeah. I love that. I love that part of the creative process, and the fact that you're like, I love to improvise as well. There's just something about it that, there's no rules, there's no strings attached, there's no expectations. You can just be at one with the music and the instrument,
Yes. And I think that's, we learn so much spiritually, psychologically from that, because there is so much expectation to conform to certain ideas in life. And it's nice to just liberate ourselves from that in some way. And music is a great way to do that, especially when we go, okay, I'm just going to make noises, and my noises are fine. You don't have to judge them, and I don't have to judge them.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Do you ever find yourself gravitating towards like a certain rhythmic pattern or a certain key or anything like that?
Yes. I mean, as I say, like if I'm improvising, the notion that improvisation is completely free of the intellect in action is not true. So I mean, it's just, the intention is spontaneity, but still ideas are going to come up and you're going to get fixed on them, and you're going to explore something or expand something. So yes, it could be a certain tonality or a certain sequence or a rhythmic idea. I mean, there's, it might be like a little minimalist thing that's sort of a cell that starts expanding or contracting, or yeah, absolutely. Anything can happen. It can be a little jazzy, or it could be a little bit more classical sounding, or somewhere in between, or very rock and roll. I don't know. I quite like experimenting with intervallic ideas, maybe like stacking fifths, or expanding an interval, or contracting an interval. But it just depends on what comes up in each moment.
That's nice.
Yeah, and you as a music therapist, I mean, you probably understand like the natural, like little children will gravitate to the minor third, and so yes, I think we gravitate towards certain things that are physiologically natural, without me being able to be an expert about that. I'm sure that there are things, that patterns, that we're going to gravitate towards naturally.
Yeah. Certain tones and even timbres just sort of feel good and just feel like safe in a way,
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So you play piano, but do you ever dabble in other instruments just for fun?
Well, I play the guitar, and I play the bass guitar, and I play the piano. So those are the three instruments that I really play on a daily basis, and it would claim to have competence on. I do play other instruments. As I told you before we started, I played the violin for 7 years, but I'm scared to open the box, the case that my violin is in, because it's probably the strings have gone ping, and they're sort of don't exist anymore. Maybe the violin is just a sort of dust in the inside of the case or something. I don't know. I'm sorry, Mr. Violin. I'm sorry I've abused you and left you in your case for the last 20 years. But yes, so I do play those three instruments: piano, bass, and guitar. And yeah, I play some very bad drums as well if you need a bad drummer.
Well, everybody could use a bad drummer, I think.
It's true. It's true.
If you could wake up with magic powers to play any instrument perfectly other than what you already do, what do you think you would try?
Well, definitely the drum kit. I mean, it's such an incredible instrument. And because I think principally because you're using all four limbs, I think that's a really interesting concept. And some of my favorite drummers, just have that polyrhythmic element, and I'm sure that's really good for the brain if you can have four different meters going on simultaneously or whatever. But I suppose we can do that on the piano with 10 fingers. Somehow we could probably get away with a certain amount of a similar approach with that sort of polyrhythmic element. So drums, definitely. What else? Bolivian nose flute. I don't know. It's a good one, right? I don't know. I think I've already got quite a lot to deal with. In my dreams, everything.
Right? That's a good answer. Yeah. Every single instrument.
Yes, all of them. Yeah.
So what is one of your favorite parts of the creative process?
Well, I'm still learning all the time what that is, and I think it's fresh and new each time. I think as soon as we as soon as we define it too much and think that we understand how to do something, then it can become a bit contrived. And I think we see that a lot in the world at the moment. There's incredible creativity, but there's also a genericism in the music industry that's, it's just so much out there, but a lot of it is kind of adhering to the same creative principles rather than discovering a deeper way of expressing something. And I think that's a shame, because all of us have an incredible potential creatively, but the expectation of the industry is to conform to something. Maybe we could blame radio or the music, the record labels, or the expectations that A&R have, the limitations that are placed on, or maybe the creative process has become a little bit secondary to branding and image. And so those are the things we're confronted with. But I think it's just so exciting to almost create a process for each thing one does, to discover a new way of doing something. So I think maybe that's the most exciting thing is that the germ of an idea, and then the discovery of what am I going to do with this idea? How am I going to expand it? How am I going to flesh it out or develop it so that it has something that means something to me, and then hopefully to other people too. I guess that's what excites me when I hear something that's novel and innovative as opposed to predictable. There's a safety in predictability. So that's good too, I guess, because it's nice to feel safe and warm and cuddly and comfortable. But then there's also like this, wow, that's really making me think. That's really making me kind of realize there's a lot more. That's a complete new way of seeing things subjectively. And I think that's what music has, that potential to give us a sense of the infinite, a sense of the unknown. So yeah, playing with all those kinds of ideas, I think I'm just learning all the time that I don't know anything.
I feel like sometimes creativity is just this huge unknown land, and we're all just exploring it, different parts of it on different days. Maybe we're hiking up a river over here, or maybe one day we're just chilling in a meadow over there. It just depends on what you're doing and what you're bringing to the table.
Yeah, I mean, I was walking in the woods this morning, as I do sometimes, and I just got a sense of a sort of new sensations in my body. I was walking across the like mossy grass, and it was kind of bouncy under my feet, and it's just beautiful when you have those things, because we get locked into experience, don't we? We get locked into the repetitiveness of experience, and then we have a very narrow perspective on what life is, and then we feel down, or there's this like infinite space, and perhaps creativity can help us gain an access to that. I mean, I practice meditation, so I think that really helps me kind of go to the deeper part of myself, and then experience what that means, the blissfulness at the root of ourselves, and that expansiveness. I mean, some people just have that, and other people have to perhaps acclimatize to it. But I think music is also a vehicle for that, a vehicle to go beyond the norm, go beyond what we just take for granted, and to experience subtler things, different things. So it's very exciting.
I love that you talk about meditation. Do you find that your musical world helps you meditate, or vice versa, that in meditating helps your musical world?
Yeah, I mean, as I say, like meditation, so I practice a thing called transcendental meditation. So it's a very specific technique, and really what it does is it takes you to the quantum level of reality. So which is the fundamental ground state of being, or the fundamental ground state of the self. And so when that's actually touched upon, it's not a belief system, it's nothing to do with religion, it's an actual mental technique, an effortless technique. You're not pushing, you're just sinking into the self. And so there can become a realization that actually there isn't anybody here. And that's self-realization, or liberation, as all these traditions might talk about. So when and it's not a belief, it's not an intellectual understanding, it's an actual experience. So you're literally liberated from the limitations of what appears in this thing that we forget is just an appearance. It's like a hologram. And so I think that liberation from fear, and liberation from the anxiety of having to maintain a sense of self, and it just puts us into a much more spontaneous place. And that's where creativity is, or everything. The creative process itself is emanating from that ground state of being, including the appearance of an individual, the appearance of a three-dimensional space, time-space continuum, history, good and bad, I'm not good enough, I'm so amazing. Like all of these things, conceptualization itself is coming from that level. And so if we can go to the root of that hierarchy of the creative process, we can actually start manifesting it, or start choosing for ourselves what we put belief into, rather than feeling overwhelmed by what appears to be what we're supposed to believe in. So it turns it on its head. Instead of there's a physiology and a brain, and I've got to learn a ton of stuff in order to be something. That's all arising in consciousness, and consciousness is infinite, and consciousness creativity is infinite, because that's all there is. And so, yes, that's from that perspective, meditation can free us up to be purely creative, and transcend the limitations that we're given culturally, the belief systems, the rights and wrongs. And that's all the problems we see in the world. We're going, oh no, Israel is right, no, Hamas is right, no, the Palestinians are, or Donald Trump, no, Joe Biden, and over here it's like the conservatives or Labour, or it's Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum, the globalists, and no, we've got to be nationalists. Like, all of these are just concepts that are nonsense, because in truth, we are all the totality of experience. We're all the whole thing. Nobody should be controlling any of it. We're free. We should all be free to express ourselves fully, and to do that in love. And why are we killing each other or fighting about who's right or wrong? It's like kids in the playground who misunderstand the fact that the playground's big enough for everyone to run around in it. And so it's that's the benefit of meditation. It can change everything. Because it just stops, it just annihilates negativity. It just puts us all into a state of grace, a state of, of course, there's all kinds of traditions, Christianity, Islam, all kinds of, whether religious or spiritual traditions, or just, as I said before, like, just some people naturally will understand that, because their physiology is already kind of expanded in that way. So yeah, I mean, potentially we could have an amazing time on this planet, where we're just all creative and we all share the resources, and we don't have to put each other down in thought, word, or deed. It's all just like, wow, yeah, great. Oh, great. We're not there yet, obviously. So, but that's, to me, I mean, there you go. Like, that's what meditation, I think. And I'm not alone. I mean, the other people that I know that practice this particular technique, a lot of them arrive at the same place. Like, why we can have an incredible time blissfully, just enjoying each other and enjoying ourselves. And the creative process is part of that, whether it's just the kindness of a smile, or a symphony, or a rocket ship, or whatever, or making a nice cup of tea for my friend Tammy.
That sounds fascinating. I might have to actually give meditation a try. I have a hard time sitting still.
Oh, the good thing about TM, as we call it, transcendental meditation, is that it's not based on, because you're going beyond the surface level of the mind, you don't have to be able to sit still. Like, that's a misconception that puts a lot of people off. Oh, I'm too fidgety, I can't sit still. But it's the natural desire of the mind is to move towards greater happiness. And so when you have a little mantra, a little sound, and that you start that sound in the mind, and then it's a vehicle that allows you to sort of travel deep inside of yourself. And so you're not trying to do that. Your physiology wants, your mind is structured to do that. So you're not adding something, you're just sinking into what's already there, which is who you really are. And David Lynch Foundation teaches the same technique. So David Lynch, the film director, has a foundation that actually goes into schools and teaches it in poor areas of the US, and because it's really helpful to lower the crime rate when people chill out, so yeah, I would recommend it to everyone. It sounds like I'm a salesperson for the EM movement. I'm not, honestly, but it does help me.
That's fascinating. I'll have to pick your brain later about that, but I'd love to get back to the album. So you of course talked about your creative process and part of who you are. And did it feel weird at all bringing yourself to a tribute album for a band that you weren't in?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so far in my career, there's been a little bit of an expectation to do Cream's music because it was my dad's band, and it's a business. So you go to an agent, say, "Hey, man, I've got this great record," and they go, "Yeah, we're not interested in that. But if you do a tribute to your dad, we'll give you all the money and we'll get right behind it." Because so there's an element to that because it's tried and tested. And I think if you talk to Sean Lennon or you talk to Julian Lennon or any of these kind of kids of famous people, there might have along the way been similar kind of pressures. And having said that, it's such great music that I think all of us who are kids of those people from the past are honored to do it. It's because like we were talking before, when you sit down and learn a Chopin nocturne or a Bach prelude and fugue or whatever, it's honoring a tradition. And that's really important because we can learn so much from what's come before us and build on that. And so, yes, it feels a little strange because I'm also a writer and I'm still finding my way to get my own music out there. But at the same time, it was a great opportunity to do this record, and the people involved are all wonderful. So, I think it's just been very nice. But yeah, it's a little odd. It's a little odd because it's my dad, but then it's my dad, and I love my dad. He's not with us anymore, so it's a nice way of like honoring him and stuff. So yeah.
And you guys have a really impressive listing of other artists who help out on the record. Joe Bonamassa, and you said Ginger, of course. But it's just fantastic.
Yeah, Paul Rodgers is singing. Deborah Bonham, who is John Bonham's sister, she's wonderful. Maggie Bell from a Scottish band Stone the Crows. Bobby Rush, who's pretty well known in the US as a blues singer, incredible guy. Bernie Marsden from Whitesnake and Neil Murray from Whitesnake. And Bernie just left us as well. He just passed away a few weeks ago, which was really sad. He's such a lovely guy. So yeah, lots and lots of people on the record that were all kind of, I guess, part of the tapestry of that whole side of the music business. Joe Bonamassa has always kind of cited Cream as one of the bands that he grew up listening to, and so it was great to have Joe in the studio. He's a really nice guy, and so yeah, I think we lucked out. We had some great people come in.
Yeah, it sounds amazing, and it was one of those things where I was born in the 80s, so I didn't grow up inherently listening to Cream, but I would hear it occasionally, and then I listened to the album and I was like, oh yeah, I know this song and I know this song and I know this song, and I was like, I didn't realize this one was Cream, and so it was just such a lovely surprise to recognize music that I'd always enjoyed and didn't always clock as that band, or hear things that I'd not heard before and just fall in love with them for the first time.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? And I think it's a little different in the UK and Europe, but in the US, I've spent a lot of time in the States, and that kind of era of classic rock is still very prevalent, isn't it? Like,
oh yeah,
it runs through the generations. So, I did some shows with Ginger Baker's son Kofi a few years ago, and we were touring across the States, and people would turn up like in their 75-year-olds. We saw the original band in 1968. But they'd kind of bring their son, and then the son would bring the grandson who was like 9, and so they were all liking it, and so it was encouraging in that sense that good quality songwriting and good quality music does stand the test of time. Some of it falls by the wayside, but a lot of it, when I listen to Cream, it doesn't sound dated. It's obviously it's recorded in a certain way, but even that, it's just great music played by great musicians in a particular style, but it doesn't seem to get old. And as you say, like, even if people don't know like the names of songs or who played them, when they're they're still on rotation on the radio in the US, which is a kind of not so much over here. As I say, it's like a little different. We are the birthplace of Ed Sheeran. So there's that, and there's like what we call grime, and like different kind of like more dance EDM, and different kinds of music, pop music and everything. But there's still a blues scene over here, and Cream are still well known, and Zeppelin are still well known. But I think in the States, as you say, like people grow up listening to that stuff in the background. It's the part of their lives, really.
Yeah, it's pretty prevalent. Like it doesn't matter what town you go to, there's always a local, some sort of local radio station that plays hits of like the 60s, 70s, 80s. And, it's going to have like the Eagles and Cream and Queen and, Foreigner and things like that. So, yeah. and it's not always cool to listen to like some other stations, but it's always cool to listen to the rock station that plays those,
And that's what I'm saying. It's like, it's ironic because over here it would be not cool at all. It would be the opposite. Like, oh man, you listen to all that old stuff, man. But it is cyclical. And we've kind of, I think, collectively had a resurgence of 80s pop music, and even in music that's being made now, certainly up until recently, I was hearing all these elements of sounds, timbre that were kind of very 80s sounding, synth patches and all kinds of things. So yeah, I think nothing ever really disappears entirely. It's like recycled, or the original stuff is still around. So I think Cream is relevant. I think the songs are wonderful. If I got to do this record again, I suppose I'd double its length and have a lot more like improvisation, because the original band were known for, their 25, 30-minute versions of songs live anyway. So but I think we did all right. There's lots. I think there's maybe 15 songs on this record, so it's quite a lot.
Yeah, and it's excellent. Comes out November 3rd everywhere in whatever format you prefer. Heavenly Cream. And Malcolm, thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Thank you, Tammy. It's really nice to chat with you.
Excellent. And listeners, please check the show notes for how to pre-order and or order, depending on when you're listening to this episode. And as always, thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Like the show? Have a question? Stop by the Facebook and Instagram pages. Links are in the show notes, or search for Creative Piecemeal Podcast on social media and click follow for all the latest.